Welcome back to Stacey Can Can. I'm making green beans today. So we were able to acquire incredibly late in the season, very late in the season, 60 pounds of green beans. I know that's a lot, but in order to make dilly beans and green beans, these are family favorites of mine, you need a lot of beans, plus it's late in the season, and I wanted a lot of beans just in case some of them weren't great, and that happened. So, anywho, what we will be starting off with today, what you need for dilly beans, not dilly beans, green beans, you need beans, and a lot of them you're gonna need about, to fill up 7 quarts for your pressure canner, you're gonna need about 14 pounds of green beans. If you're just gonna do pints, you're gonna need about 9 pounds, give or take, of green beans. So you're just gonna take your bean, you wanna snap the end off of it because it's just kind of the stem end, I do. You can also take off the little pointy end if you want. You can also leave it on. It's really up to you on how you want to do it. And then you want to snap them to be about 1 inch. Some of these, like these, are left over from when we made dilly beans. These are the ends if the beans are too long for the jar, or if they're too curly cued and you can't shove them in the jar for dilly beans, then we snap them and use those pieces or those ends for green beans. This is the byproduct of all the dilly beans that I make. So anyway, but if you're just gonna do green beans, you can just snap them. You want to be about 1 inch. I can say that some of these are, like this one's a little too long. And the reason why you don't want them too big, this one's a little too long, you don't want them too long because they end up, they kind of jam up in the jar when you're trying to fill the jar. And then you just don't get as many beans in a jar with that, and you have to add more liquid in it, etc. And the only liquid we're adding in it is water today. So, so you're gonna make sure to wash these and snap these in an inch length. Then you're gonna want to, you can hot pack. By hot packing, you would just boil them for about 5 minutes, and it can kind of regulate the enzymes as you're waiting for processing. My grandmother used to do that, but we have better safe canning practices and such. So I just raw pack, which is just simply putting the snapped green beans into a hot jar, and which I have actually sitting in the canner at the moment. I've got some jars heating up, just on simmer. And then you'll use you can also add some salt to it. I do. You don't have to. It's if desired. You do want to use pickling salt because it's not iodized, like it doesn't have iodine in it like regular table salt does. So I use pickling salt. If you use table salt, it'll make your beans kind of cloudy and it'll darken them. So make sure to use just a regular pickling salt. And you have to use a pickling salt. You can't use a kosher salt or flaky salts or whatever, because it's the same size as like table salt. It's much finer, so you're going to get an accurate salt measurement versus flakes where there's just too much space in between each granule. So just keep that in mind. The tools you're going to need are and you'll need a teaspoon of salt for your pints, teaspoon of salt for quarts, and a half teaspoon for pints. So your tools that you're going to need today is, you'll need a funnel, you need your lid. Well, actually, we don't need our lid lifter because I'm not heating the lids, but you can heat the lids if you like. So if you want to heat the lids, get your lid lifter. We will bubble, so you need your chopstick. You need your Headspace tool because we're giving it for 1 inch Headspace today, and a ladle, and your jar lifter. You may not need the ladle if you're just going to use a tea kettle to pour the hot water in, but I always need more than that, so I always boil some water too. So it's up to you on that piece. And then you'll need a cutting board possibly to kind of chop up some of the beans if you want. It's really up to you. So from there, let's get to canning. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna pull our jar, a warm jar, out of the pressure canner, because I do have, remember, we've got to put in 2 inches of water in the canner at the bottom. We've got to make sure there's that amount in there. And we don't want to put, so I have the jars heating up. Even though we're cold packing, I have to put a hot liquid in it. So you don't want to put you don't want to put something hot into a cold jar. You can compromise the jar. And then you just start filling it up. Now I like to put it on a cutting board like so, because you do kind of have to, you're sort of like raw packing it, or you're tapping along. So as you notice, I find it's pretty easy to just sort of tap away a little bit here, because as you tap, it helps to, you don't want to crack it, but I find just kind of doing a little bit of a tapping there helps to settle some of the beans, because you want to try to pack them as tightly as you possibly can. And then we'll go ahead and use the ladle to take the hot potato. I got water boiling here, which I'm turning down. And you go ahead and pour that over the top. Before we finish pouring it over the top, I'm going to add my teaspoon of salt. Pour it over the top until you have it completely, we're doing it to a 1-inch headspace. So I'll probably pour it, which is actually like at the lip, very, very, the first ring of the, where you screwed on, the first thread, I guess? I don't know. So what I'm gonna do though, is I'm gonna, I didn't fill it all the way up because I am going around and I'm bubbling. This is a part where you can kind of, or you can, I still have a hard time doing that, how folks kind of smear around the edges like that. I just find that hard to do with foodstuffs in there. So anyway, just gonna make sure we are good and we don't have bubbles in there. I think I can throw in a few extra beans in here, which I'm gonna do, just to get a nice good pack. Check, we're doing a 1-inch headspace, and then I'm checking it. We actually, that looks really good. Yep, that looks great. I am not gonna go ahead and use a paper towel to clean the rim. Hot potato. My grandmother used to just dip her finger into the hot water and just smear it around and clean the rim. I am not that steadily. So again, I am not, they changed the rules in 2014. You do not need to, you don't need to heat the lids anymore. Hot potato, this is hot potato. Hot potato. And because there's water in here, the jars kind of tip over a little bit, and then you just gently set it into the canner and repeat. All right, so here is the steam. I got steam coming straight out of the vent pipe. So this is when you have a consistent stream of steam. Yes, I said that right, stream of steam. You want to set the timer for 10 minutes, and that helps vent the pressure canner. Okay, so the timer has gone off for the venting for the 10 minutes. Now we're going to put the little stopper over the top here. And this is the part where it cuts off the steam and we start building pressure. So we're going to build pressure. We're going to start watching the timer on the pressure gauge. And when it gets to, because this is a dial gauge, when it gets to 11 pounds of pressure, then you start the timer for, because this one's got quarts in it, we're going to set the timer for 25 minutes. If you have a weighted pressure canner, you get it up to 10 pounds of pressure for your weighted canners. So I've got the pressure up to 11 pounds of pressure on the dial gauge here. I'm not showing it to you at the moment. I'm assuming you know how to read a dial gauge. It's fine. Sorry. As you'll notice, I'm actually doing another pot of green beans too. But so yeah, so I've got it up to 11 pounds of pressure because I have a dial gauge, 10 pounds for weighted pressure canners, and we're setting the timer for 25 minutes as these are for quarts. You would do 20 minutes for pints. Timer has gone off, so I've cut the heat on the canner. And we're gonna wait for the dial gauge to move down to 0 before we can take the lid off and remove the jars. And you have to leave the stopper on. You gotta wait till it completely cools before you remove the stopper to vent the lid. So just cut the heat, let it go to 0 before you do any of that. You notice that the gauge has now gone down to 0, so we can go ahead and take the steam cap valve off, and And you're gonna need some, you will definitely need your oven mitts for this because it's hot, the canner is hot. And just carefully take the lid off, and remember, remove it, look at all that steam, away from your face so you don't burn yourself. You will really burn yourself. And then you take your jars out of the canner. Check out our little grainy beanies. Anyway. One thing to note when you're using a pressure canner, just remember that your jars are going to take a lot longer to cool than coming out of a water bath canner, especially as quart jars. The bigger the jar, the longer it's going to take to cool, the longer it'll take to seal. So remember to put these in a spot where they can cool on their own. You don't force cool them, you don't put a fan on it, none of that. Keep it in a draft-free room if possible. And just let them, they're still working, so just let them do their thing. And but thank you for joining me today. Please check the show notes below for the recipes, and like and subscribe to the page. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, by all means reach out to me on my Facebook page. I'm Stacey CAN CAN. Instagram is, you can at me at Stacey CAN CAN. My website is www.staceycancan.com. Email is info@staceycancan.com. And thanks so much for joining me again, and happy canning.